Of all the things web developers like to complain about, one thing sticks out the most: old browsers. Developers hate supporting older browsers that don't include new technologies like Flexbox. If you haven't already, you will eventually experience this pain. So what can you do? In this video, I'll teach you about progressive enhancement, a technique you can use to leverage all of the Flexbox properties in newer browsers while still providing an acceptable experience in browsers that don't support it. The main idea behind progressive enhancement is to build a basic site that functions across all major browsers. It might not be pretty, but it should be usable. For browsers that support newer features, you progressively add features to enhance the experience. One of the best things about CSS is that browsers ignore properties they don't understand. Let's say you're writing a site that needs to support Internet Explorer 8. You'd like for your buttons to have rounded corners, a nice gradient, and a box shadow, but IE8 doesn't support any of these properties. Does that mean you can't use them? Of course not. You simply make a basic button for IE8. Then, for browsers that support the modern feature, you add the extra functionality. In Chrome, the button looks really nice. In Internet Explorer 8, the button looks like it did before because IE8 doesn't understand any of the new properties that we added. Progressive enhancement with Flexbox follows the same idea. The modern layout will center the button, and the old layout will leave it where it was before because it doesn't understand the new properties. Sometimes you'll build layouts that depend on modern features. Take the multi-button example from Chapter 7. In an older browser, it looks like this. This layout doesn't show anything because we hid the radio buttons for the multi-button control. So what can you do? One option is to use a tool like Modernizer. Modernizer is a library that appends classes to the HTML element to tell you which features are supported by that browser. If you include this library, you could rewrite the multi-button CSS like this. Since the newer browser supports Flexbox, the Flexbox class is appended to the HTML element, so all of the styles are applied. In the older browser that doesn't support Flexbox, the HTML element doesn't have the Flexbox class, so it falls back to radio buttons. Sometimes, your layout completely depends on a browser supporting a certain feature. Let's say that you're building a checkers board. Without Flexbox, the board really doesn't look like anything. It doesn't make sense. As a last resort, you can display a message to users letting them know that they're using an older browser that your site doesn't work on. If you're using Modernizer, you can do this with a little JavaScript. The newer browser won't see this alert, but an older browser does. Generally speaking, this is a really bad idea. Only do this if your site absolutely doesn't work without Flexbox. Also, be careful with how your site interacts with non-sighted users. Sometimes, screen readers disable features that aren't needed by those users. Hopefully, the problem of older browsers lacking modern features will soon be a thing of the past. Microsoft's newest browser, Edge, is evergreen, meaning it's always kept up to date. Chrome and Firefox are also evergreen, and Safari users do a good job of upgrading. Soon, we'll be living in a world where we can use the web's latest features without worrying too much about breaking older browsers. Until then, progressive enhancement is a powerful technique you can use in your CSS. Done right, it'll make people with newer browsers happy and let people with older browsers still use your site.